10 years after leaving his wife, a millionaire sees a woman at the airport with a young man who looks like her. He tries to approach them. The Buenos Aires airport was full of activity that Friday morning. Javier Lopez, a successful 45-year-old businessman, was hurrying towards his boarding gate, dressed in an expensive suit and carrying a leather briefcase. He constantly looked at his gold watch. Another business trip, he thought, sighing. Despite his success, Javier felt an emptiness that all the money in the world couldn't fill. Suddenly, something caught his attention. A woman with brown hair walked past him, holding the hand of a boy of about 10 years old. Javier stopped, mouth open. The woman's face was too familiar to him. "Lucia," he murmured incredulously. But it wasn't only seeing her that surprised him, the boy at her side was like looking at himself in the past. The same green eyes, the same blonde, rebellious hair. Even the way he walked was identical to Javier's when he was a child. A memory struck him. Javier saw himself 10 years ago, like a punch in the stomach, escaping from the apartment he shared with Lucia, leaving only a cold letter on the kitchen table. Lucia's face had been sleeping peacefully, unaware that her life was about to fall apart. Javier felt his legs tremble. Could it be? He thought in panic. Lucia was pregnant. The guilt consumed him. He had abandoned not only his wife but also a son he didn't even know existed. Javier began to walk towards Lucia and the child, his heart pounding. He needed to talk to them, to explain, to understand what was happening. But the crowd at the airport got between them. Javier found himself pushing people, desperate to reach Lucia and the boy. He called out to her, but his voice was lost in the bustle of the airport. When he finally got through the crowd, Lucia and the boy had disappeared. Javier looked frantically around, but there was no sign of them. "Sir, are you okay?" asked a flight attendant, noticing his agitated state. Javier barely heard her. His phone rang. It was Veronica, his current wife. He ignored the call, still looking for Lucia and the child. "Sir, your flight is about to leave," insisted the stewardess. Javier looked at her, then at the boarding gate, and back to the airport lobby. At that moment, he made a decision that would change his life forever. "No, I'm not going to board," he said, still distracted. The stewardess was surprised, but Javier was already walking away, determined. He couldn't just leave now, he needed to find out the truth. Leaving the airport, Javier took a taxi to the city center. He told the driver his destination while his mind raced. As the taxi pulled into Buenos Aires traffic, Javier pulled out his phone, ignoring Veronica's missed calls. He dialed the number of an old friend, a private detective. "Francisco, it's Javier. I need you to help me find someone," he said as soon as his friend answered. As he gave Francisco the details he remembered about Lucia, Javier couldn't stop thinking about the boy, his son. Guilt, curiosity, and a fear he couldn't name were mixed in his chest. Javier knew that his life was about to change drastically, and for the first time in a long time, money and success seemed completely insignificant. What mattered now was finding Lucia and that child, and somehow trying to make up for the terrible mistake he had made 10 years ago. As the taxi drove through the streets of Buenos Aires, Javier got lost in memories of the past. His mind took him to a night 10 years ago in a hotel bar in New York. Javier was there on business, trying to close a big deal. Frustrated after another day of fruitless meetings, he ordered a drink at the bar. That was when Veronica appeared, beautiful and self-confident, with a smile that promised adventure. "Difficult day?" she asked, sitting next to him. That conversation changed everything. Veronica was an executive in a large company, full of ambition and wealth. She talked about money and power in a way that made Javier feel small but eager for more. In the months that followed, Javier made excuses for more business trips. Every day meeting Veronica left him more addicted to her presence, to her promises of a luxurious and successful life. "You deserve more," Javier, said Veronica. With the right people, he could be a millionaire. Javier found himself comparing his simple life with Lucia to the glamorous existence Veronica offered. Lucia, a dedicated teacher and loving wife, didn't seem to understand his ambitions. "Why do you need more?" asked Lucia. "Aren't we happy as we are?" But Javier wanted more. Much more. The conflict inside him grew every day. He loved Lucia, but the desire for wealth and status consumed him. Veronica represented everything he thought he wanted: success, power, recognition. On a cold autumn night, Javier made a decision that would change several lives forever. He waited for Lucia to fall asleep, packed a suitcase, and wrote a short, cold letter. "Lucia, I can't go on like this. I need more from life than you can give me. Please don't try to find me." With a heavy heart but blinded by ambition, Javier left the apartment without looking back. The tears he refused to spill burned in his eyes as he headed to the airport, on his way to a new life with Veronica. What Javier didn't know was that just a few days later, Lucia would discover she was pregnant. Alone and devastated, she cried for hours, holding the pregnancy test, not knowing how to face the future without Javier. Back in the taxi in Buenos Aires, Javier felt the crushing weight of his past actions. How could I have been so selfish, so blind? "We're here, sir," the voice of the taxi driver brought him back to reality. Javier found himself in front of his friend Detective Francisco's office. With trembling hands, he paid the taxi fare and got out. "I need to find them," Javier murmured to himself, determined. Inside Francisco's office, Javier told the whole story: the meeting at the airport, his suspicions, his desperate need to know the truth. "Do you realize what you're doing, Javier?" asked Francisco, concerned. "This could change everything in your life." "I know," answered Javier, running his hands through his hair. "But I need to know. I need to fix this." Francisco sighed but began taking notes. "I'll need more details about Lucia, last known address, work, anything that can give us a clue." Javier closed his eyes, trying to remember every memory of Lucia. It was like a stab of guilt. "She was a teacher," he said. "She started working at an elementary school in the north of the city. Our apartment was." While Javier provided information, his phone kept ringing. Veronica, insistent. He continued ignoring her. "This will take a while," Francisco warned. "I'll need a few days to gather concrete information." Javier nodded, anxious and impatient. "Do whatever it takes. Money is not a problem." Leaving Francisco's office, Javier found himself lost in the middle of Buenos Aires. The city that once felt like home now seemed strange and hostile. He had money, success, everything he had ever wanted. But at that moment, he would give anything to go back in time and make the right decision. With the weight of the past on his shoulders and an uncertain future ahead, Javier began his journey to correct the biggest mistake of his life. Finding Lucia and the child became his only mission. He just hoped it wasn't too late. In the days that followed, Javier stayed in a hotel in Buenos Aires, anxiously waiting for news from Francisco. He barely slept, tormented by thoughts of Lucia and the child who could be his son. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Lucia woke up early, as usual. The modest house she called home was quiet, except for the soft sound of cartoons coming from the living room. "Ezekiel, breakfast," called Lucia, placing pancakes on the table. A 10-year-old boy with disheveled blonde hair ran into the kitchen. "Pancakes," exclaimed Ezekiel. Lucia smiled, ruffling her son's hair even more. For a moment, her smile faltered as she noticed once again how much Ezekiel resembled Javier. As Ezekiel ate, Lucia lost herself in memories. The first few years after Javier left were a nightmare. Pregnant and alone, she struggled to keep her teaching job while her belly grew. A memory hit her: Lucia, 8 months pregnant, sitting on the bathroom floor, crying with unpaid bills strewn around her, the fear of the future consuming her. Back in the present, Lucia shook her head, pushing away the painful memories. "We did it right, honey," she whispered to Ezekiel, who was too busy with his pancakes to notice the doorbell ring. It was Marcos, Lucia's boyfriend of 2 years, a kind man with an easy smile and gentle eyes. "Good morning, my loves," he said, entering and giving Lucia a kiss and Ezekiel a hug. Lucia felt a wave of gratitude. Marcos had been a blessing in their lives, accepting Ezekiel as if he were his son. On the other side of the city, Javier received the first pieces of information from Francisco. "She still lives in the same neighborhood," Francisco said on the phone. "In a small house on Olmo Street." Javier's heart raced. So close, after so much time. "And the boy?" he asked anxiously. "Yes, he has a son, Ezekiel, 10 years old, who attends the local school. From what I could find out, Lucia has been raising him alone since birth." The words hit Javier like a punch. It was true. She had a son he had never met, who grew up without a father. "There's something else," continued Francisco. "Lucia has been dating for 2 years a man named Marcos. From what I know, he is very present in their lives." Javier felt a pang of jealousy that surprised him. What right did he have to feel jealous? Meanwhile, in her mansion in the wealthy suburbs of Buenos Aires, Veronica paced back and forth, furious. Javier hadn't answered her calls for days. First, he missed an important flight, now, he was completely absent. "Something is wrong," she muttered to herself, her mind plotting possibilities. Back at Lucia's house, the morning routine continued. Marcos helped Ezekiel with his backpack while Lucia prepared the boys' lunch. "Don't forget we have that dinner with my parents tonight," Marcos reminded her softly. Lucia felt herself smiling, but inside, she felt a restlessness, an inexplicable feeling since she had seen that man at the airport. A man who looked too much like Javier. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Javier, now driving slowly down Olmo Street, felt the same. His heart almost stopped when he saw the modest house that Francisco had described, a swing in the front yard, a bicycle leaning against the porch. He parked across the street, watching. What would he say? How would he explain his actions? How would he ask for forgiveness for 10 years of absence? At that moment, the front door opened. Lucia came out, as beautiful as ever, followed by Ezekiel and a man that Javier assumed was Marcos. They were laughing, a happy family on the way to school. Javier sank into the seat of the car, a whirlwind of emotions consuming him, guilt, regret, jealousy, fear, but also a growing determination. Somehow, he needed to be a part of that life. He needed to meet his son. He needed to repair what had been broken so long ago. But how could he do that without destroying the happiness that Lucia and Ezekiel seemed to have found? In the days that followed, Javier couldn't keep away from Olmo Street. He parked his car a few houses away, observing the routine of Lucia's family. Every glance from Ezekiel made his heart shrink. One day, as he watched, the watering can slip from Lucia's hands, the water spreading across the floor. Javier whispered her name incredulously. Before he could react, Lucia crossed the street, her eyes sparkling with anger. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "Lucia," Javier stammered. "I saw you at the airport with Ezekiel. I needed to." "Don't you dare say his name," interrupted Lucia. "You don't have that right." Curious neighbors began to look out their windows, attracted by the commotion. "Please, Lucia," begged Javier. "I know I was wrong, but Ezekiel, he is my son, right?" Lucia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. When she opened them, they were full of unshed tears. "Yes," she said finally. "Ezekiel is your biological son. The son you abandoned before even knowing." Javier felt the words like a slap in the face. "I didn't know," he murmured. "If I had known." "What?" Lucia replied. You would have stayed. Don't fool yourself, Javier. You made your choice 10 years ago. Javier stepped forward. Let me meet him, please. I know I don't deserve it, but... Stop, Lucia almost shouted. You're right, you don't deserve it. Ezekiel has a good life and a family that loves him. I won't let you ruin it. At that moment, a car stopped, and Marcos got out, looking confused, from the agitated Lucia to the well-dressed stranger. Is everything okay, love? He asked, placing a protective arm around Lucia. Javier felt a wave of irrational jealousy. That man was living the life that should have been his. Everything is fine, Lucia answered without taking her eyes off Javier. He was just leaving. Marcos looked from one to the other, sensing the tension. Do you two know each other? He asked. Before Lucia could answer, a school bus stopped at the corner. Ezekiel got off, walking towards them. Panic took hold of Lucia. Javier, go away. Now, she hissed. Without thinking, Javier hid behind a tree, his heart pounding as he watched Ezekiel approach. The boy was his spitting image. Mom, is everything okay? Asked Ezekiel, noticing Lucia's agitated state. Lucia forced a smile. Everything is okay, honey. Let's go inside. Marcos will help you with your homework. Ezekiel entered the house, followed by Marcos, who threw one last confused look toward where Javier was hiding. Lucia stayed behind. Go away, Javier, she said in a low voice. Don't come back. Please. Javier stepped out from behind the tree, devastated. Lucia, Don't, she interrupted him. You have no idea what I've been through, what Ezekiel has been through. I won't let you ruin everything now. With that, Lucia entered the house, closing the door firmly. Javier stayed on the sidewalk, feeling more lost than ever. He had seen his son so close and yet so far. Inside the house, Lucia leaned against the closed door, trembling. Marcos appeared in the hallway, worried. Lucia, who was that man? She looked at Marcos, the man who had been her safe refuge for the past few years. She owed him the truth. That was Javier, she began, her voice hesitant. Ezekiel's father. Marcos paled. What? But how? Lucia took a deep breath. It's a long story, one I hoped I would never have to tell again. Meanwhile, Javier returned to his car, devastated but determined. He had made the worst mistake of his life 10 years ago. Now, he needed to find a way to fix things, no matter how impossible it seemed. Javier spent the night without sleep in his hotel, tormented by painful memories. For the first time, he confronted his past behavior with brutal clarity. He remembered 5 years before leaving when Lucia excitedly shared an opportunity for a promotion at school. That's great, darling, Javier had said absent-mindedly, not looking up from his newspaper. But don't get too excited. After all, it's just an elementary school. Lucia's smile visibly faded. Another memory, Lucia had suggested they save money so she could do a master's degree. Javier had laughed. Why? It's not like you're going to make a lot more money teaching kids to color. Back in the present, Javier felt shame gnawing at his stomach. How could he have been so blind, so insensitive? Meanwhile, in the house on Olmo Street, Lucia and Marcos spoke softly in the kitchen after Ezekiel went to bed. Do you think we should tell him? Marcos asked softly. Lucia sighed, running her hands over her tired face. I don't know. He has the right to know. But what if it hurts him? What if Javier disappears again? Marcos hugged Lucia, offering silent consolation. The next morning, Ezekiel came down to breakfast, and found Marcos alone in the kitchen. Where's Mom? He asked, yawning. She had to leave early, Marcos replied, placing pancakes on Ezekiel's plate. Ezekiel toyed with his fork, looking thoughtful. Marcos, can I ask you something? Of course, champ. It's about my real dad. Marcos froze, his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. What do you want to know? Why did he leave? Didn't he like me? Marcos's heart broke at the sight of Ezekiel's vulnerable expression. Hey, it's nothing like that. It's complicated, but it has nothing to do with you. Understand? Ezekiel nodded, not entirely convinced. Outside, Javier watched the scene through the window, his heart tightening as he saw the affectionate interaction between Marcos and Ezekiel. Feeling determined, Javier waited for Ezekiel to leave for school. When the boy passed by, he appeared casually. Hey, boy, is this ball yours? Javier asked, holding a soccer ball. Ezekiel looked at him suspiciously. Oh, I thought it might have fallen from your yard. Do you play with Marcos sometimes? Replied Ezekiel, relaxing a bit. Javier felt a pang of jealousy. You know, I used to play a lot when I was your age. They chatted for a few minutes. Javier savored every second, memorizing every detail of his son's face. I have to go, said Ezekiel finally. I'll be late for school. Sure, replied Javier, reluctant to let him go. It was nice talking to you. Ezekiel waved and ran off, leaving Javier with a mix of joy and sadness. Far away in the mansion in the neighborhood, Veronica finally got information about Javier's whereabouts. He hired a private detective who quickly uncovered the shocking truth: Javier has a son. Veronica's eyes were dangerously bright. That fool has a son he never told me about. She walked around the luxurious room, her mind racing. This explains Javier's strange behavior, his sudden disappearance. A cruel smile formed on her lips. So, this is how he's gonna be loved. You want to trade your life of luxury for a school teacher and a boy. Veronica picked up the phone, her fingers dialing quickly. Hello, Mr. Ramirez. I need you to investigate more about this child, Ezekiel, right? I want to know everything, and first the divorce papers. It seems that I will need them soon. She posted a plan already forming in her mind. If Javier thinks that he can just leave me and his life of wealth, he will be in for a big surprise. Veronica will not give up without a fight, and she always fights to win. Lucia spent the restless night fighting with her thoughts. In the morning, with deep dark circles under her eyes, she made her decision: it was time for Ezekiel to know the truth. Ezekiel, honey, can we talk? Lucia called after breakfast, sitting on the couch. She took a deep breath. Do you remember when you asked about your father? Ezekiel nodded curiously. Well, there's something I need to tell you. Lucia began with a trembling voice. Your father, he's in town. He wants to meet you. Ezekiel's eyes widened. He's alive. Lucia explained everything to him, how Javier had left them, how he found out about her pregnancy. With each word, Ezekiel's expression went from surprise to confusion and finally to anger. He left us, shouted Ezekiel, standing up. And now he wants to meet me? No. I don't want to see him. Ezekiel, please understand, Lucia tried to calm him down. To understand that my real father is a coward. Ezekiel ran to his room, slamming the door. Lucia sank onto the couch, tears running down her face. She knew it would be difficult, but the pain in Ezekiel's eyes destroyed her. Meanwhile, Javier finally faced Veronica in his mansion. Why are you here? Veronica asked coldly. I thought you were too busy with your little secret family. Javier was shocked. How did you know? Oh dear, Rio, Veronica said humorlessly, I know everything. The question is, what are you going to do? I'm here to say it's over, Veronica. I can't keep living this lie. Veronica's face twisted in anger. You think you can just leave me after all I've done for you? All you did was manipulate me, he retorted. You fueled my ambition. You made me abandon Lucia, and you came so willing. Veronica interrupted sarcastically, don't play the victim, Javier. You chose money and power. I only showed you the way. Javier felt the shame burning. He was right, he had made his own decisions. Well, now I'm choosing differently, he said, turning to leave. If you walk out that door, Veronica threatened, I will expose all your dirty dealings. Every under-the-table agreement, every bribe. You will lose everything. Javier stopped, frozen. He knew she meant it. Back at Lucia's house, Marcos came home from work to find her still shaking on the couch. What happened? He asked, worried. Lucia explained the conversation with Ezekiel. Marcos hugged her, but he felt her tension. Do you think I did the right thing? Asked Lucia, unsure. Marcos hesitated. I think so, but, now Javier is going to be a part of our lives. Lucia heard the fear in Marcos's voice. He's Ezekiel's father, Marcos added. But you are the one who has always been here. Marcos nodded, but the air between them was full of uncertainties. That night, Javier wandered through the streets, his mind a whirlwind. Veronica's threats resonated in his ears, mixing with memories of his past behavior. Flashbacks surfaced, Javier dismissing Lucia's dreams of getting a master's degree, Javier neglecting Lucia's emotional needs, focused only on earning more. The fulfillment hit him like a punch. His machismo and greed had not only destroyed his marriage but had stolen precious years with his son. Standing in front of Lucia's house, Javier saw the light in Ezekiel's room go out. His son is so close and yet so far away. I'm sorry, Javier murmured to the night. I'm sorry for everything. He knew he had a long road ahead of him, face Veronica, correct past mistakes, and earn back Ezekiel and Lucia's trust. But for the first time in years, Javier was determined to do the right thing, no matter the cost. With one last look at the house, Javier turned around and walked down the dark street, ready to face the consequences of his actions and fight for a chance to be a part of his son's life. Javier wandered through the streets of Buenos Aires, his mind a whirlwind of contradictory emotions. Guilt consumed him, but the desire to connect with Ezekiel drove him forward. He felt like a ship in the middle of a storm, without a rudder or direction. One afternoon, Javier saw Ezekiel leaving school. Without thinking, he approached him. Hello, Ezekiel. Do you remember me? The one with the soccer ball. Javier smiled nervously. Ezekiel looked at him suspiciously. Yes, what do you want? I just wanted to see how you were, Javier stammered, realizing too late how strange he must have seemed. I'm fine, Ezekiel replied, walking away quickly. Javier stood there, feeling like a complete fool. Later in his hotel room, he cried for the first time in years, the reality of his failure as a father hitting him with all its might. Lucia, watching from a distance, noticed Javier's clumsy attempts. Part of her wanted to yell at him to stay, to protect Ezekiel at all costs, but another part, a part she barely recognized, felt sorry for Javier. He's trying to get close to you, Lucia told Ezekiel one night. Ezekiel frowned. Teacher, why didn't he care before? Lucia sighed. People make mistakes, darling. Sometimes very big ones. Hurt you, said Ezekiel, his voice a mix of anger and sadness. Lucia hugged her son, her heart breaking from the pain she saw in his eyes. Meanwhile, Marcos, feeling the change in the air, made a decision. On a starry night, he took Lucia to a romantic dinner. Kneeling, he presented a ring. Will you marry me? Lucia was speechless, tears in her eyes. She loved Marcos, he was stable and reliable. But the proposal, amid all the emotional chaos, took her by surprise. I need to think about it, she replied, seeing the disappointment in Marcos's eyes. Days later, Ezekiel was riding his bike down the street when a car suddenly appeared. Javier, watching from afar, ran without thinking and pushed Ezekiel out of the way, both falling onto the grass. "Are you okay?" asked Javier, his heart racing. Ezekiel, surprised but unharmed, nodded. "Thank you," murmured, looking at Javier with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Javier wanted to hug Ezekiel to tell him that it was his father who loved him but held back, helping the boy to get up silently away. Veronica was plotting. She hired investigators to dig deeper into Javier's life, determined to find something she could use against him. "Find out everything about his business dealings of the last 10 years, she ordered over the phone. "Every penny, every deal. I want to destroy him." Unaware of Veronica's machinations, Javier spent a sleepless night questioning every decision that had led him to this point. He looked at his expensive suits and his luxury watches, feeling disgusted with himself. One night, walking through the city, Javier stopped in front of a toy store. In the window, he saw a wooden train just like the one he had as a child. Tears came to his eyes thinking about all of Ezekiel's birthdays that he had missed. At that moment, Javier made a decision. He couldn't change the past, but he could fight for a better future. Even if Lucia and Ezekiel never completely forgave him, he would do everything possible to be present in his son's life. With renewed determination, he returned to his hotel and picked up the phone, ready to make the call that could change everything. "Francisco, I'm Javier. I need your help to resolve some legal matters. It's time to settle accounts with the past." When night fell on Buenos Aires, Javier felt like he was in the eye of the storm. The worst was yet to come. But for the first time in a long time, he was ready to face the consequences of his actions, no matter the cost. The truth, like a time bomb, finally exploded one Sunday afternoon. Ezekiel, returning from a walk in the park, saw Javier chatting with Lucia on the porch. Suddenly, everything made sense. The man with the soccer ball. The stranger who saved me from the accident was my father. "Is he right?" shouted Ezekiel, running towards them. "It's my dad." Lucia and Javier froze, taken by surprise. "Ezekiel, can I explain?" began Lucia, but Ezekiel was already crying. "Why did you lie? Why did you let him get close?" he shouted, the anger and confusion clear in his voice. Javier took a step forward. "Ezekiel, it's my fault. Your mother was just trying to protect you." Ezekiel looked at Javier, his eyes filled with pain. "You abandoned us. Why come back now?" The painful confrontation lasted for hours, with Ezekiel alternating between anger and tears, Lucia trying to calm the situation, and Javier facing the harsh truths of his past actions. Meanwhile, in his office, Javier made the most difficult decision of his life. He picked up the phone, his hands shaking. "Mr. Ramirez, I am Javier Lopez. I need to confess some unethical business practices that I have carried out in the last few years." Javier knew that this would mean the end of his fortune, possibly even prison, but he could no longer live with the weight of these secrets. In Lucia's house, Marcos arrived in the middle of the chaos. Seeing Javier there, his expression darkened. "What is going on here?" he asked, his voice tense. Lucia, emotionally and physically exhausted, pushed Marcos aside. "Marcos, I can't marry you." The words came out before he could think. Marcos stepped back as if he had been slapped. "Is it because of him?" Marcos asked, pointing at Javier. Lucia did not answer. "Honestly, it's because of me. Because of Ezekiel. We need to resolve this, our past. I can't drag you into this mess." Marco left, hurt and confused, leaving Lucia devastated but strangely relieved. The next morning, Javier's world completely fell apart. The headlines screamed, "Business magnate confesses fraud." Veronica, furious with Javier's confession, had leaked every dirty detail she could find to the press. The reporters surrounded Lucia's house, shouting questions about Javier and Ezekiel. Lucia, horrified, tried to protect Ezekiel from the chaos. "Mom, why are they here?" asked Ezekiel, scared. "It's complicated, honey," answered Lucia, closing the curtains. "But it will happen." Javier, besieged in his hotel, saw his life fall apart. His assets were frozen, business partners abandoned him, and the possibility of prison became very real. Desperate, he called Lucia. "I'm sorry," he said as soon as she answered. "I didn't want this to affect you." Lucia sighed. "I know, Javier, but it has. What are we going to do now?" Javier closed his eyes, the guilt consuming him. "I'll fix it, Lucia. Somehow." That night, as the camera flashes lit up the street, Lucia sat with Ezekiel in his room. "Ezekiel, I know this is hard," she started, "but your father is trying to do the right thing." Ezekiel was silent for a moment. "He's going to jail." Lucia felt her heart tighten. "I don't know, baby, but whatever happens, we'll be together, okay?" Meanwhile, Javier faced the very real possibility of losing everything. But for the first time in years, he felt at peace. The truth came at a high price, but it was a price he was willing to pay for the chance to be a part of his son's life. Sitting alone in his hotel room, Javier picked up the phone once again. It was time to face the consequences of his actions, no matter how painful they were. "Hello. Yes, I'm Javier Lopez. I'm ready to turn myself into the authorities." The sun had barely risen when Lucia walked into Ezekiel's room to wake him up. Her heart stopped at the sight of the empty bed and the open window. A crumpled note on the nightstand said, "I need to think. Don't look for me." In a panic, Lucia called Javier. "Ezekiel has escaped," she shouted. As soon as he answered, Javier felt the world spinning. "I'm coming over there now," he said, already running towards the door. When Javier arrived, he found Lucia crying on the porch. For a moment, they forgot all about their past, united by their fear for their son. "We will find him," promised Javier, taking Lucia's hands. They began their search, going through every street and every park that Ezekiel used to visit. With every minute that passed, his fear grew. "And if something happens to him?" murmured Lucia, her voice trembling. Javier swallowed. "Nothing will happen to him. We can't lose hope." While they searched, memories of the country flooded their minds. Lucia remembered Javier playing with little Ezekiel in the garden before everything fell apart. Javier relived the moment he held Ezekiel for the first time in the hospital, the love he felt, the fears that made him run away. It was late in the afternoon when Marcos appeared, out of breath. "I came as soon as I heard," he said. "How can I help?" Lucia looked at him, surprised and grateful. Despite everything, Marcos still cared. "Thank you," she whispered, gently touching his arm. The three of them separated, covering more ground. The night came, cold and threatening, increasing the desperation of all. It was Javier who finally found a clue in the old park where he used to take Lucia years ago. He saw a solitary figure sitting on a swing. "Ezekiel," he called softly, approaching. The boy looked up, his red eyes swollen from crying. "Why did you come back?" he asked, his voice choked. Javier sat on the swing next to him, his heart heavy. "Because I made the biggest mistake of my life when I left, and I've regretted it every day." Since then, Ezekiel was silent for a moment. "You hurt Mom, you left us," he said. "I know," Javier replied, tears in his eyes, "and there's nothing I can do to change that. But I'm here now, trying to make things right. Even if you never forgive me, I want you to know that I love you, Ezekiel. I've always loved you." At that moment, Lucia and Marcos came running. "Ezekiel," exclaimed Lucia, hugging her son tightly. The scene was interrupted by the arrival of Veronica, bursting in. "So is this it?" she shouted at Javier. "You throw away everything we built for this pathetic little family." Javier stood up, positioning himself between Veronica and her family. Enough, Veronica. It's over. Veronica laughed bitterly. You're going to lose everything, Javier, your fortune, your freedom. Javier looked at Lucia and Ezekiel, then back at Veronica. For something that money can't buy, the family. True love. Veronica advanced furiously, but Marcos intervened, stopping her. You should leave, he said firmly. Overwhelmed, Veronica threw one last look of contempt and left, leaving a tense silence behind. Javier turned to Lucia, Ezekiel, and Marcos. I'm sorry, he said, his voice full of emotion, for everything I did in the past, for the chaos I have brought to your lives. Now I will turn myself in to the authorities tomorrow. You won't have to worry about me. Ezekiel, surprising everyone, took a step forward. You're going to go to jail. Javier nodded sadly. I probably did bad things, Ezekiel, and I need to pay for them. Ezekiel looked at Lucia, then back at Javier. But what if I want to get to know you better? Javier's heart swelled with hope. I would like that more than anything, but I understand if you don't want to. Lucia, with tears in her eyes, hugged Ezekiel. It's your decision, darling. We will be here for you no matter what you decide. At that moment, under the stars of the old park, a broken family slowly began to heal. It wouldn't be easy, there was a lot to solve, a lot to forgive. But for the first time in years, there was hope. Javier, Lucia, and Ezekiel hugged each other, a hug full of tears, regret, and above all, love. Marcos watched from a distance, a sad smile on his lips, knowing that he had done the right thing. The future was uncertain, but that night, at least, they were together, and for now, that was enough. The sound of the judge's hammer rang out in the courtroom, sealing Javier's fate. Found guilty of financial fraud, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison and ordered to return all his wealth. Javier accepted the verdict with a calm that surprised everyone. For him, it was a fair price for his mistakes. In the months that followed, Javier used his time in prison to reflect and plan his future. He enrolled in business ethics courses and began to develop ideas to help small businesses. Once released, Lucia, true to her word, allowed Ezekiel to visit Javier in prison. The first visits were tense and uncomfortable, but gradually, father and son started to get to know each other. How was school this week? Javier asked, genuinely interested. Ezekiel, initially reluctant, began to open up. I had a math test, I think I did well. Javier smiled proudly. I'm sure you are very smart, Ezekiel. Over time, the conversations deepened. Ezekiel asked difficult questions about the past, and Javier answered honestly. As painful as it was, Lucia watched this relationship develop with a mix of apprehension and hope, keeping clear boundaries and making sure Javier understood his role in Ezekiel's life. He needs you as a father, Lucia told Javier during a visit, but I can't risk him getting hurt again. Javier nodded, respecting Lucia's decision. I understand, and I will do everything I can to be the father Ezekiel deserves. Meanwhile, life continued outside the prison walls. Lucia and Marcos, after much reflection and honest conversations, decided to give their relationship a second chance. On a sunny day in spring, Lucia walked down the aisle, beautiful in a simple dress. Marcos was waiting for her, his eyes shining with love. Ezekiel proudly wore the rings. Javier, still in prison, received the news with mixed emotions. There was a pang of sadness, but mainly he felt relief knowing that Lucia and Ezekiel had found stability and love. When Javier was finally released, he was determined to rebuild his life honestly. Using his business knowledge, he began working with an NGO that offered free consulting to little entrepreneurs. I want to use my skills for good, he explained to Ezekiel during one of their weekly meetings in the park. Ezekiel, now 12, looked at his father with new respect. That's great, Dad. The word Dad still made Javier's heart skip a beat, it was a title he was determined to earn every day. Lucia watched the new family dynamic develop cautiously. She and Marcos provided Ezekiel with a stable and loving home while Javier strove to be a present and responsible father. 1 year after his release, Javier attended Ezekiel's science fair at school. Standing next to Lucia and Marcos, he felt a wave of gratitude for being a part of his son's life, although in a different way than he had imagined. "I am proud of you, son," Javier told Ezekiel after his presentation. Ezekiel smiled, hugging Javier, then Lucia and Marcos. It was a scene that few would have imagined possible months ago, an unconventional family, but united by their love for Ezekiel. Later that night, Javier reflected on his journey. He thought about his past macho behavior and how he had underestimated Lucia and her ambitions. He now saw clearly how wrong he was. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity," Javier said to Lucia when she came to pick up Ezekiel. Lucia felt his gaze soften as she looked at Ezekiel, leaving Javier with a sense of peace he had never experienced during his years of wealth and power. He had lost a fortune but gained something much more valuable, the chance to be a good father, a better man. The road ahead was still long, there was much to learn, much to correct. But Javier was determined to move forward, one day at a time, always striving to be the best version of himself. That night, under the stars of Buenos Aires, Javier made a silent promise to himself, to Ezekiel, to Lucia, and to all those he had hurt. He would live the rest of his days with integrity, compassion, and love. It was the least he could do to honor the second chance that life had given him. And so, with hope in his heart and determination in his eyes, Javier walked towards his modest apartment, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring. His journey of redemption was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, he was on the right path. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give a like, and activate the notification bell in order not to miss our next videos. The next video that appears on your screen will also excite you. Kiss, and until the next story.